That's a video attack. Well, thanks for staying and thanks for joining us on this. This is not a mystery anymore. Just to underline what Craig said, this is about cybersecurity. But there's a refinement to what Craig said. About half of you wanted cybersecurity when you voted on Friday afternoon, and a quarter of you wanted to discuss North Korea. Last week, North Korea said that there was a US cyber attack on North Korea. So that means 3/4 of you are getting what you want. I've got a laptop here because what we're going to do is make this more interactive with you, because I know a lot of you are catching up on your emails and catching up on the morning webmails and so on. I'd like you to use your tablets or your smartphones, whichever manufacturer you're using, to contribute ideas and at least to ping me if something big is coming to your mind as you listen to our guest. Now, I need to explain what's up there. This is T-Mobile. You will not be able to read it from here. But we're going to leave that up there throughout the session because this shows cyber attacks which are underway at this moment. You need a telescope to read it, but on the right-hand side, the 15 source countries in the last month. Russia is at the top with 2.4 million. Taiwan next, Germany, Ukraine, Hungary, US, Romania, Brazil, Italy, Australia, Argentina, China, Poland, Israel, Japan, the source of cyber attacks. The density of the color inside the country indicates the intensity, and that's why Russia, the Russian Federation, has the deepest color there. So bear that in mind to inform our discussion. Philip Stevens stood here yesterday and gave himself the gold cup in the Moderator stakes for the privilege of moderating the most gripping session on China. Well, I did warn him that he would only keep that cup for 24 hours. On Friday, when Craig gave you those three options, he did also say he wanted to experiment, and that's the kind of feedback that you've been giving those who've been here before, to experiment with new formats. So this is part of an experiment, including what's up there, and including the feedback that we're going to get both from you and elsewhere. And this is about constant innovation, a new cutting edge. And then Philip Stevens will give me the cup later. I want you to feel more engaged and contributing organically to the direction of this. And what I'd like to suggest is that here with me is Sarah and Lindsay. If you want to tweet, and there will be addresses going up there in a moment, if you want to tweet or send a Facebook message, sometimes one of you might want to intervene at some particular point about a particular point that's being raised in the discussion. And I'd like to know from you very quickly, because then we can make this a much more organic debate, which moves off in different directions according to the kind of things which are on your mind as it happens. So it's not ruling out questions and involvement from you on the floor. It's just a way of helping me through this, via the curating of Sarah and Lindsay, to get a sense of where the crowd view is pushing us in this discussion. What we're debating is invisible and it's insidious. It is a war, it is a conflict without bang bang video appearing on television channels. I'll give details in a moment. Who have we got on the panel? Carl Bildt, Foreign Minister of Sweden, who, if he doesn't like the way the debate is going, will tweet me and send me a message from his iPad. President Toomas Ilves of Estonia, and of course, you have a particular role in all of this because of what you went through several years ago, and you are now hosting the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. I'll repeat that, the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn. And Nick Coleman as well, who is from IBM. He is currently the head of global cyber, and has the distinction of having managed a cloud, which is a fascinating concept. He's also on the EU Security Agency Advisory Board, so comes to this discussion, we've chosen the panel literally in the last 24 hours, with that inside understanding from business. I was talking about the kind of insidious, invisible challenge that there is out there. Let me inform our debate by important statements that have been made in the last few days, first in Washington. That was from Jim Clapper, who is the Director of National Intelligence Director. He said that this is now the most difficult and challenging issue on the outlook for the coming years. It's a world which our definition of war now includes a soft version. When it comes to distinct threat areas, our statement this year leads with cyber, and it's hard to overemphasize its significance. Increasingly, state and non-state actors are gaining and using cyber expertise. That from the National Intelligence Director on the Hill last Wednesday. Sir Jonathan Evans, the MI5 director in London, very rarely gives speeches. His last speech was on this central issue. This is a threat to the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of government information, but also to business and to academic institutions. What is at stake is not just our government secrets, but also the safety and security of our infrastructure. And he goes on to say it's very difficult for those in business to comprehend the enormity of this threat, which is invisible, but is out there in the way that mapping confirms to us this morning. And finally, Admiral James Stavridis, he might have been here, SACEUR. He was testifying on the Hill on Friday, and he says, I think in cyber we find the greatest mismatch between our level of preparation and the level of danger. This is something that cuts across all parts of government and all parts of society. So the question for us this morning is how engaged are people out there? And that brings me to a few of the kind of messages we've already been getting coming in on tweets. One of them, for example, in making policy on cybersecurity, how will the need for protection be balanced with privacy rights? There is real concern out there, and there are people watching us worldwide on a video link. Let me ask you first, Carl Bildt, how much is your government concerned by this issue?
Well, I think every government is concerned by the issue. We might be somewhat more concerned than the average, and that is because of the fact that we are a fairly high-tech nation. We are the home of some of the world's leading communications and information technology industries. We have a fairly advanced industrial base in aerospace and other defense technologies. And a lot of the things that we see in terms of cyber thefts and attacks and trying to steal things, information, is directed against those sorts of interests. And accordingly, protecting that and protecting our financial infrastructure and protecting sort of the government infrastructure is a key concern.
What about the public understanding of this?
Patchy would perhaps be the best way of putting it.
Is that being polite?
That is being polite, which is unusual for me. But
what is the adjective you like to use then?
Well, insufficient and needs to be developed. A lot of people are sort of, they are there with their PCs or iPad, they're totally ignorant of what might happen. But let me also say, Nick, for state the obvious, that we are moving rapidly into a world of hyperconnectivity. We are all going to be connected. This is a fantastic development. It increases the potential for freedom and prosperity all over the world. We are all going to live in a cloud where the possibilities for human development and economic prosperity is going to increase at a phenomenal speed. But we need to be concerned with the reliability, the safety, the protection and security of the networks and ourselves. And that awareness of that has not developed with the same speed as, I think, the awareness of the potential for good that is done.
From Jim Clapper, from Stavridis, from Sir Jonathan Evans, what do you believe needs to be done and how quickly?
Well, I mean, those statements were sort of hardly sensational. But we've been working with these issues for a very long time. Are we perfect? No. Are we struggling with the same issues as a lot of other governments to get the structures right? Yes, we are. Are we struggling with issues, what's going to be the framework of international cooperation on these issues? Some of them involves extremely sensitive issues. So there are problems associated with that. Yes, we are struggling with that. Are we perfect? No. Are we working intensely on this? Yes, you bet we are.
President Ilves, you went through a major cyber attack. what would you be your reflections on how seized of this critical issue your country, Europe, and globally people are?
Well, let me start off. I mean, Estonia was in the news 6 years ago because it was the first time there was a clearly politically motivated attack, but they were very primitive. I mean, those are DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks. That is not a concern. I mean, for us, why we are at the forefront of all this is because we're probably at the forefront of e-governance, where we put more government services online than just about anyone else. So we deal with this a lot. But people should be thinking about it much, much more anyway, because there is no such thing anymore as critical infrastructure. It is critical information infrastructure. Everything, all your power plants, your water supply, everything it runs actually over the internet. You may not know it, but it runs over the internet. That is that you can turn your entire high-tech, or you can turn your entire army and military into legacy technology if you just bypass that and cripple a country. No telephone service, no financial services, no banks. A dam stops working. And so we need to look at this in a much more sophisticated way than we have up till now, because I think largely people outside the area of specifically cybersecurity have not really followed how dependent everything around us is on a functioning internet, actually. I mean, and most supervisory control and data acquisition systems, that SCADA systems, which run everything in our societies, are highly vulnerable. And of which the best example was the Stuxnet attack, but that was against one sort of secret military installation, the Bushehr, nuclear power plant development site. But I mean, that same virus can wipe out your electrical system. So it's a big problem. Now, what you would add to that is that this does lead to a completely different definition of war, because we have all of our NATO Article 5 ideas are based on an appropriate and proportional response. So if someone sends a rocket to your electrical plant, you send a rocket back, and you know where it came from. Today, your electrical plant can just be out of commission. You don't know who did it, where it came from, and moreover, what is the appropriate response. Those are the kinds of issues we need to be thinking about much more.
Nick Coleman, how much is business gripped by this, understanding the enormity of what might face them an hour from now?
So I think there's awareness. I mean, I think the issue gets talked about. The fact that it's a topical issue here is it's not just an issue in business, it's an issue in government as well, about government systems, it's an issue about the private sector systems. And I think that the question is, what's happening out there? So two things for me are happening. One is we are instrumenting more technology into our environment. So if we think about, we've talked about maybe mobile phones, smartphones, but explore a little further. What we're doing is making smart grids, we're making smart meters, we're doing e-transport, we're digitized. We're actually connecting more and more systems with more and more devices, which is giving us more and more information to have to watch and spot. So more connections, more dimensions. The other side of the thing, which we've touched on a little bit, is the threat is becoming more advanced, persistent, and sophisticated.
But the challenge is to mitigate, to prevent, to close those doors, to shut them tight. How many are really understanding the enormity of that challenge and the necessity?
Well, some. I mean, some are advanced, but
percentage-wise, can you give a...
There isn't a percentage. I think it's a maturity level. But I think what it is really is whether the organizations have proactive ability to mine the information and work out who's attacking and spot it and be able to defend it. And I'd say there's a small percentage of organizations who are sophisticated at that level to be able to really get the intelligence. I mean, we have 133 countries monitored at the moment for our infrastructure and for our clients that we're monitoring. And what we're doing is having to respond quicker, with more active intelligence to be able to provide those insights. So it's more that what we have to do is then work out how we share with government, how we build those intelligence platforms to collaborate, to really create what I think, what we're really talking about is not just being aware of cybersecurity, but being able to spot it, being able to respond to it. And frankly, if your neighbor or your fellow organization in that sector is being attacked, you need to understand and be prepared for it yourself. And that's about us providing intelligent platforms.
All right. Many of you wanted this debate, so I hope that you'll come in now with issues and points you want to raise. But we are lucky to have Chris Coleman, who is chairman of the US National Intelligence Council, and therefore is aware fully of what Jim Clapper said. Can you add to your assessment of how much the public, corporates, governments really understand the scale and enormity of what is happening?
Well, I think exactly the reason why Director Clapper began his testimony with a strong emphasis on cyber threats was for the purpose of public education, bringing the attention, shining a spotlight for members of Congress and the public. Because the understanding is, as Nick stated, it exists, but it's insufficient. Given the enormity of the threat, the level of understanding and action needs to be greatly elevated.
Do you believe that can be done, and how should it be done?
Well, it's done in many ways, not simply public testimony, but close consultation with corporations and with those who are responsible for infrastructure, 85% of which is in private hands in the United States, but all of which is linked to IT control systems now.
Finally, how many of those who need to be educated are simply saying, it's not likely to happen to me, so I'll leave it to another day?
Well, I think it's less a question of overall awareness, but for business it always comes down to cost and benefit, and demonstrating the enormous risks and potential costs of the loss of intellectual property, the loss of documentation with respect to negotiations of contracts. So I think the case can be made quite persuasively that the costs are substantial. But then private sector leaders then need to commit the resources to protect themselves.
Chris Coleman, thank you. And you'll be talking at greater length to David Ignatius at 1:45 today. Let's pick up. I'm getting a lot of messages and ideas of the kind of things which are on your mind. Don't worry, these are people outside at the moment, so I'd like to get a sense from you at the moment. How many of you would like to intervene so I can scale this somehow? 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, good. I've got an idea, therefore. Let me give you one particular point from Farah Halima in Egypt. Why is cybersecurity so easy to breach? Hacking of both huge companies and governments, especially in the Middle East, seems to happen every week. It's happening more frequently, according to that.
Well, I think as we just talked about, people are opening access to infrastructure. They're plugging in more mobile phones. They're putting more digitized infrastructure. And frankly, we have to catch up, and we have to understand at the same time, as we also touched on, that there are lots of groups, different actors, people looking to take information, intellectual property. There are also people trying to cause disruption. There's a whole set of motives. So what we've got is the technology revolution, and we've got the more sophisticated piece. And frankly, at the same time, it comes down to people, process, and technology. So we've got to get this hygiene level, but we've also got to be able to respond. Why is the challenge exists? Because frankly, we are living with lots of technology in our daily lives, and we have to embed security into all those processes. We've done some, but we've still got a long way to go.
President Ilves and Carl Bildt, let's just quickly define the players who are threatening us.
Well, the worst actually is a new form of public-private partnership. Mafioso groups who rent themselves out to governments,
rent themselves out to government.
Well, I think it's quite clear that that's what is going on in the case of large, I mean, much of what we have to deal with today comes from hacker groups. If you read Misha Glenny, who was here but left, his book, Dark Market, he talks about a group in Ukraine that basically signed an agreement with the FSB, the Russian intelligence group, promising not to steal credit cards from within the former Soviet Union, or actually the CIS, and that then they would not be prosecuted. They had to agree to do things only in the West, and also offer their services when needed to the FSB. I mean, that's an example of one. I mean, when you see this deniability that we constantly see from various governments, in a sense, it's plausible deniability. The government itself is not sitting there hacking into your companies, stealing intellectual property. They have people, students working for them doing it. So the government is not doing it. They say, oh, it's just a dormitory, or it's just, as the Mandiant report of 2 weeks ago, which I recommend everyone read. I mean, it just happens to be in a certain area where there just happens to be a PLA.
This is in
installation.
Shanghai.
Pardon me?
This is in Shanghai, the PLA cyber headquarters
Well,
there.
this is, I mean, I'm just referencing the Mandiant report. I'm a president. I can't accuse anyone of anything.
You were mentioning China and Shanghai, though. Bildt, define the players who are threatening.
Well, as President Ilves said, I mean, it's a huge variety of them. The hacker community, and those are people who start by saying it's just fun to see what they can do. But then they are sometimes recruited, sometimes by state actors, sometimes by criminal actors. We've got a huge problem of cyber criminality. I was the other day in The Hague with the European Cybercrime Center, where we are pooling resources to do advanced forensics and tracking, and it is just mind-boggling what these people are doing in terms of stealing money, but also really unpleasant things in terms of child pornography and those sorts of things. Then we have, of course, commercial operations of different sorts, and then we have state actors. State actors that are, of course, more sophisticated because they got the resources. They're involved in theft, intellectual property, intelligence gathering of different sorts. And then at the higher end of the scale, we have destructive things. I mean, Stuxnet, there really we crossed the Rubicon in terms of the first time an advanced cyber weapon was deployed. And that is, of course, a dangerous development. Because just to make one remark on that, I mean, there are lots of differences. A weapon that you send away, a normal one, a bomb, I mean, it destroys and the bomb is destroyed. This type of cyber weapon, I mean, first you might not detect it, but once detected, it's still there. You can take the weapon, you can re-engineer it, and you can send it back. So this can easily, if you send out an advanced weapon, cyber weapon, you can get it back with devastating effect. And that's why but these are at the very, very high end. And I think the actors are, increasingly careful with it. But everything below that is, I think, affecting our societies more than we think. And as said, networks are growing. Just one figure, in 2017, we believe that roughly 85% of the population of the world will be covered by mobile broadband networks. And within a couple of years more, most of the world's population will be on mobile broadband, and we will be living literally in the cloud with all that entails.
Nick, which brings me to you managing a cloud up until recently. I mean, I don't know where you sit on that cloud, but it creates a lot of images. Is a cloud secure or not?
Well, security is a relative concept, right?
Well, it's either secure or not.
Well,
if you lose your data, it's insecure.
Well, you design security into a system and then you operate it with security features. I think the answer to your question is there are different kind of clouds. When we talk about the cloud, it's like
gold-plated clouds, silver, bronze?
Certainly, yes. Ones which have higher levels of security than others, and it's how you construct that security.
So how do we know whether we're using a gold-plated or a mud-plated cloud?
First of all, you have to ask, I guess,
well,
of your cloud.
Ask?
You should ask your cloud people who you're
asking. If you can find them.
I mean, let me give you a practical example. last year, I led the company to create a paper about how does IBM deliver cloud security around those cloud infrastructures we're running. And we actually put a paper out. It's the first paper we've done on cloud, which describes what we do. And for example, let me just give you a couple of things that are helpful. You know, people talk about, well, where is my data in the cloud? So in our engine, the customer who comes and uses that cloud can specify where they want the data to reside, so that actually they're making the choice. If you take physical security, the cloud makes it look like it's in the air somewhere, but actually it's in a data center and in storage networks. So actually, you know, I've taken advantage of the infrastructure and the security we had in our outsourcing business to put these cloud centers inside data centers which have all that security.
But
so,
Nick, did you get emails from people saying, is my data safe on your cloud?
I actually got emails from people about other clouds and said, could I comment on their clouds more than that?
Is there a cloud rating so we know whether our data is secure?
There is some assurance you can get. So for example, on the cloud, there are international standards. So ISO 27000 for security, and the clouds that we have are certified to that standard. We've also gone through external audit to get something called SSA 16. So these are technical standards, but they are corporate audit mechanisms.
This is your chance to reassure everyone, though, both here and out there.
But you have to ask the question. I mean, I don't think you should just think that because someone writes it's a secure cloud on a website, which happens to some other people, that it is secure. What I mean is you have to ask the questions.
Well, let me ask the question in a different way.
Sure.
Is data on a cloud vulnerable?
It depends how it's looked after. It can be secure. I can give
President Ilves.
Let me give you one example. There was a law firm, a mid-tier law firm, who said actually going to the cloud made them more secure because actually what they'd been doing previously was having one guy running with the tapes, and they had no idea what the operation is. Moving to the cloud, they understood they had process, and they could get some confidence that actually they get the benefits of scalability. So I wouldn't put everything on the cloud, but certainly the cloud it can be made very secure. And
President Ilves.
I had the EU task force on cloud computing for the EU with my other hat. The issue is not the cloud. It's not whether the data is in your hard drive or it's somewhere else. The fundamental issue that we have here always is identity. Is the person, the address, the thing coming in, is it who it says it is? All of the problems have come from something coming in that claims to be something else. So, I mean, you get an email from me, and you say, oh, it's Tom. But it turns out it's not Tom. What you need is you need a secure identity. The current level of identification on authentication is insufficient for anybody. You need minimally a two-factor ID, which we have installed in our country, and which now Google has come out with as a thing you can buy. But unless you have a two-factor ID, anything is breakable. I don't understand how people, especially in the United States, where there is not even a PIN on their credit card, a chip, will give their credit card, and then in the back there's a 3-digit number called a CVC, and that's your security code, and you type that in, and then you're secure. This is nonsense. You need to have a two-factor minimally. I mean, we will probably go to 3-factor, but at the point, I mean, it is all up to us. We can prevent these things if we actually have secure identity. I mean, the White House was broken into, the Élysée, the French president's office, were broken into. They were both broken into because someone went into somebody's Facebook account and saw that, you know, the cousin of a secretary had a baby, and so the person working in the White House or the Élysée gets an email, pictures of Johnny or pictures of Jean. And they say, oh, I'll click that, and then it turns out what they've just taken in is not a picture of their cousin's son. It's malware that then has a keystroke logger, and everything that's typed in the Élysée is going to a certain country somewhere else.
I can't guarantee that anything you send me will be secure this morning. That's not my job. Carl Bildt, to be clear, are you comfortable about the security and safety of the data of the Swedish government on the cloud?
No.
Why not?
Well, it depends. We've got different systems. I mean, for the real sensitive stuff, we got what we consider very secure systems. Then you have to be careful nowadays. I mean, you have to think of what information you put on what kind of system, and that is always sort of the message that I give. Put the information on the system according to what you believe is the security of that particular system. And it has to be said also that I think we live in a world where far less things are, at least in the political world, far less things are secret than used to be the case. So there are more things in terms of diplomacy and other things that we can have on systems that are fairly okay from the security point of view than was the case before. But then we have some things that are really sensitive, and those I think we are reasonably certain that we are protecting.
There are a lot of questions coming in here. Let me go to 2 or 3 here to build on what we've been hearing. Please introduce yourself, will you?
Yeah, Mike Rhodes from North Carolina, work with a group called Community Care, and we provide big data population health management for over 5,000 doctors and 60 hospitals across the Southeast. So what I'm interested in is, this is obviously a huge concern for us because there's a lot of critical data and healthcare data, everything from financial data to personal health histories that are involved there. We see ourselves as very vulnerable in any cyber attacks of the future because we have an attractive treasure trove of information. And what I'm interested in is where is the conversation going to occur about what our priorities are in cyber attacks? Given that, like any warfare, we'll have limited resources, we need to decide what are we going to protect first, what are we going to protect second. Does that conversation occur at an international organization level? Is it a national decision about what they're going to protect? You know, electricity versus healthcare. Where do those conversations occur?
And there's a question here which is similar about governance from Catherine Fitzpatrick. Should there be a kind of Helsinki Accords type talks against this kind of thing to try and organize it, to try and calibrate it? Let me just take a couple more. Can you get the microphone along there? You've got the microphone now.
Imai from the Tokyo Foundation, a private think tank in Tokyo. And I have a rather basic question from an ordinary user. One of our most powerful attractiveness of the internet has been its democratic aspects, I believe. That you can connect everyone anytime, and everyone is equal. So, but contrary to that, because of the afraid of the security matters, we have to introduce a lot of code of conduct on IT. Don't download any files or don't open any doubtful emails and so on. So I'm afraid, would it undermine the possibility of IT community, like promoting democracy and so on?
Fine, okay, good. Keep your question short. We're all ordinary users, I suspect, so don't apologize for that.
Hello, my name is Ieva Kupce, Ministry of Defense of Latvia. I also have a question regarding of what can be done and more on international part. And here I actually want to refer to Minister when you said about privacy and an IBM representative describing the process, what can be done. We have to start from identifying the problem, knowing where the weaknesses are. So I have a question coming from defense sector, knowing how difficult it is to share sometimes information which is particularly sensitive. And I know that this is an issue also about companies actually sharing their vulnerabilities. So my question is, do you see and where do you see the international efforts where nations wouldn't shy away to actually share the information about those vulnerabilities so we can actually deal with it, or we can just walk around it and create codes of conduct or standards without sharing that information? Thank you.
And a number of questions already coming in from outside about privacy as well, about really whether this is the central issue. Bildt.
It's one of the central issues. I mean, if you want to protect your privacy, you must do it. And you must be careful what you put on the net. I think this is particularly for the younger generation that are sort of living on Facebook and Twitter and whatever. And they should be aware of the fact that everything that is there will be there forever, more or less. We have a discussion going on whether you have the right to erase data. That's an interesting one as well, which is, I think, in the European Parliament at the moment, as a matter of fact. But privacy, a key concern, but not necessarily the other one. On the question from Japan, I still think that we should not underestimate the power for good, for freedom and prosperity and whatever, that this development, look at Africa, what is happening there. I mean, the World Bank is saying that if you increase internet penetration or broadband penetration by roughly 10%, you increase the GDP by 1%. I mean, probably have more effect of broadband penetration than development aid in terms of what we're doing for Africa. And then, of course, when they go mobile banking in different ways, in which they do in innovative ways out in the farmers there, vast new possibilities. Of course, they need to have an adequate level of security as well, so that not cyber criminality develops in Africa to the same extent as it's already done in Europe. So they must run in parallel. But the good things are, of course, by far the dominant one. And we're also pursuing a very active international debate on the net freedom issues to be against, try to push back those governments who want to restrict freedom of information and freedom of speech and all of those issues on the net. I mean, I think we know roughly who they are.
Two things. On privacy, we need another sort of mental shift here. We are stuck in the big brother paradigm, in the idea, the thinking that came out of Orwell's 1984, and the government is bad. The government, I will argue later, is actually the last guarantor of security in a Hobbesian world. But right now, I say that every one of you who has one of these things, and you have an app, and you have a free app, just keep in mind, there's no such thing as a free app. I'll repeat that. No one is making these, creating these things out of the goodness of their heart. They want to make money. Now, if you download a free app in which you put in whatever, how many push-ups you did, what your cholesterol is. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of free health apps that you can do, and then there are all kinds of other apps, and there's no such thing as a free app. Someone is monetizing that you are voluntarily putting the most private personal information into an app, and you're doing it and giving it to someone who's going to make money off it. It's not the bad government. It's not Big Brother. It is someone else who's making a lot of money off you. I mean, they're making a little money off you, but with big data, they're making a lot of money. So that's the privacy issue, not does the government know something. And on healthcare, one of my other hats was I did the EU Commission Task Force on e-health. I don't see who's someone there. Well, if you read our report, it came out last May, and there are a lot of issues there. We treat those issues in particular. We have all medical records in my country are online and accessible to the patient because he owns the data, not the doctor, not the hospital. But again, you need a very secure access. I mean, you need a two-factor ID with independent authentication in order for that to work. Without that, it's, anyone can do what they want.
Let me keep pushing on privacy for the moment, and I'd like to ask if anyone particularly would like to talk about privacy and that level of security. That last comment was from Mark Jacobson. There are a couple more on privacy from Gilonin. In making policy on cybersecurity, how will the need for protection be balanced with the privacy right of citizens? And another one, quite long, from Joe Bailey in Switzerland. Rather than an opt-in policy when it comes to personal privacy, i.e. you can ask a company to release all information they hold on you, and they're obliged to do so. Why do we not have a system where companies are legally obliged to keep you updated about all private information they hold on you through mail, a database, or something similar? Further, upon finding this information, does the individual have the right to request it be destroyed? Nick, given what you've been managing and given that you're on the EU Security Agency Advisory Board, which direction are these predicaments moving in?
Well, I think it's a debate, and I think that the question we're also asking is how much information do we really want to have communicated to us? If you actually ask users about how much security information, how much real system information they want, they don't really tell me they want a lot of information, but they want the confidence and the assurance. So that is the system being adequately designed for security? Is it doing that? And frankly, can they put their policies into place? So when you want to say what you want to achieve for privacy, I want those kind of settings, can you see that reflected into your environment?
Is security the same as privacy, or defined in a different way?
Well, security and privacy are two parts of, of information and how you look after it. And some terms, we have a number of terms, even cyber, I'd suggest, we use in lots of different ways and contexts, and actually it may mean different things. For me, the bit that you really want to know is, who's accessing my information, and frankly, is it the people I intended to do that? And can I have some assurance? And in this world where we're now finding more persistent, advanced threats, then actually what we're trying to do is build intelligence platforms where we can spot really not only who's but whether it's unusual behavior. So you may think of that in a financial transaction in the old sense of if you paid in two places with your credit card at the same time, that would be unusual. Now with the internet, of course, that becomes a bit more sophisticated. But what we're really talking about is unusual patterns of behavior. So what I'm doing is having huge analytics deployed on those infrastructures to really deep mine the piece, so I can look for patterns. Coming to your point about reuse of threats and how those things come back again, what you really start to think is, okay, so you start with the infrastructure, what's usual, what's unusual, and then making the user aware, involved in that conversation.
Are you ahead of those who are trying to get the better of the system, or are you preempting them?
Well, I think that in some cases, in lots of cases, you're spotting things and being able to disrupt it. In other cases, you have to manage for things happening. And so, but that all comes back to actually having the information about what's going on in your system, having it appropriately assured, but then monitored real time so you know what's going on and can respond.
Right, we've got 30 minutes to run. Who particularly would like to talk about privacy at this point? Who'd like to come in on this part of the discussion? Anyone on privacy? Otherwise, I'll move it on. Please.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Hisham Elmzer. I'm from the City Council of Antwerp in Belgium. And I have actually two short questions. One, I don't understand actually the focus on China. They have only 180,000 attacks, and we are forgetting the focus on Russia that has actually more than 1 million attacks. And actually 1 on 3 countries that sources are of attacks are EU members. What's really shocking for me. And the second thing that I want to say is, if we create a regulator, if we create something that actually close and shut the doors to those hackers, I was wondering as an Arab, actually what helps the Arab Springs in those countries to get into the very important information, like in Syria, like in Egypt, are actually hackers. So how can we use that for the good goal, and how can we actually not create something that comes in the hands of demons?
I should say, for those who can't read this, that Russia is right at the top, China is number 12. You almost sound disappointed that China is only listed at number 12 at the moment.
Not that. I'm just, it's like the focus was only on China the whole time.
Okay.
So I don't read much things about actually Russia.
All right. There are important issues here, and I'll defer to anyone from Romania particularly, but I've heard senior people in this business talk about towns in Eastern Europe whose business and economy is based on violating cybersecurity. Bildt.
Well, in the former Soviet area, there are a couple of places where, there are a lot of people there who are very skilled in mathematics, in different cyber technologies. If I was running a software firm and wanted to outsource to somewhere, I would not I see Anny Sannikov up there. Minsk is a place where you have a lot of competent individuals in this particular business. And I'm not quite certain that all of those competent individuals are doing entirely innocent things. So these sort of hacker and semi-hacker and somewhat more advanced communities, they can be found anywhere, as was pointed out. But then it's a question, what are they doing? Some are doing it for fun, some are doing it for criminality, some might be sort of recruited for what I call cyber riots. That is, states are de facto saying to them, these things are evil, so go and attack them. The Estonians are bad, so attack whatever you find in Estonia, and sort of encourage the cyber hackers, or take out the computers of Saudi Aramco, as was done, 30,000 of them this autumn. And then some of them are recruited into the sort of the higher echelon, extremely advanced state operations that are run by some, and those, I would argue, are so sophisticated that are extremely unlikely to be shown on a graph like that. I mean, the most sophisticated operators operate distinctly below the radar screen.
Let me clarify that. I mean, if you lump all possible kinds of cyber attacks together, and then you're comparing a lot of apples and a lot of oranges. I mean, first of all, the first thing you have to keep in mind is you can never really, it's very difficult to find out where something is from. You can just, I mean, you can camouflage yourself fairly well. That's the whole problem of attribution when it comes to NATO Article 5 applications. But more important is that, I mean, simple primitive hacker attacks, there can be thousands of them, but if one country gets through stealth technology, which you don't even know sits in your computer, is sucking out all of your intellectual property that you've been working on for 10 years and you've invested billions into it, and suddenly it's for free in some other country. That's just one attack. But the damage is far, far worse. So this is why I'm always wary of these things, saying, well, who's doing how much? Because you're comparing...
We're saying where it's coming from.
Well, first of all, it's hard to say where it's coming from. I mean, a DDoS attack comes from all over.
Are you saying we should doubt that data from T-Mobile?
No, we don't have to doubt that data, but we don't have a breakdown of what kind of the attacks those are. And there are all the things that you don't know are in your computer, and you don't know that there's a keystroke logger in the White House that is pushing everything off to someplace somewhere else. And that, I would submit, that one attack is far more damaging than any number of attacks that just sort of, primitively take down a computer site.
Is there anyone who's a government minister or an official from any of those countries in the top 10, 15 who'd like to explain the dilemma they face as ministers or senior government officials when trying to track down this stuff? I give you your chance to respond at this point. Anyone from any of those countries? Russia, Taiwan, Germany, Ukraine, Hungary, US, Romania, Brazil, Italy, Australia, Argentina, China, Poland, Israel, and Japan. You've had your moment. There's silence on that issue, Nick.
Can I just build on that? I mean, this is about, there are lots of things happening in systems, and a lot of them look legitimate. But then what you're having to do is actually build, for example, and I'm sorry to get a bit technical, but if your firewall is behaving poorly, going outbound, as one organization discovered, and then they worked out the reason that was doing it was exactly the intellectual property theft, the firewall itself looked just like it was a technical performance issue. And what we're having to start to do, and this is where I come back to this intelligence picture, so you can create a culture, but you then have to have the intelligence, live, operational stuff. Because what you're going to have to do is pull that firewall data and say, okay, that user and that file, and then you start to build a picture of what's really going on. This means lots and lots of data. This is why it's a big data issue. And then coming to the lady's point about information sharing, it's then about how do you work with sensitive or other partners to actually create that collaboration. So increasingly what I'm doing is helping one energy company see what's happening in their sector, come to the point of the gentleman. Is it a regional? It's both a regional perspective you're looking at, a sector perspective, and it's also then down to the personal organizational perspective of what's really typical of that government organization or that private organization. But it really starts with the intelligence platform that you're creating to be able to spot it.
Nick, given you're on the EU Security Agency Advisory Board, when you look at those countries, many of which are EU members, what discussion goes on about why is it going on there?
Well, I think as the Minister said, it's a global problem. It's not one particular country. And B, I think it's about a whole different set of actors with different motives, operating from a variety of countries.
Are they identified sufficiently for you to be in a position to take action if you need to?
Well, it's always about spotting. Well, it comes back to, again, can you spot it? And then can you respond to it? And the fact is it comes from different places in the world and shifts very quickly. I think the other thing is groups and actors in this space shift. Can you identify some of that? Sure, we can see some patterns of that stuff. And lots of us could put up graphs like that. But is the graph helpful? The fact is, if I'm still sitting in an organization, what I want to know is, can I spot stuff? Can I respond to it? Is it an issue for me? And frankly, do I have the intelligence feeds and the information coming into my organization which puts me ahead of the game rather than reacting once my intellectual property has been stolen?
Let me keep pressing on the politics of this. There's a tweet from David Johns. How do we most effectively engage China in conversations about cybersecurity? Obviously, the question is broader. How do we effectively engage many countries in combating the threat from whatever is happening on a laptop or wherever in any country? What about the politics of this, Carl Bildt?
The politics of it is that we have to build up also the level of competence in our different law enforcement agencies. I mean, at the end of the day...
But Europol is across this big time, isn't it?
Europol is now working intensely, and we have a new Eurocrime cybercrime center that is starting to coordinate all of this. And it's pretty sophisticated things that you need to do in terms of forensics and trying to understand exactly what it is, and then take it to the prosecutors and the police and whatever. And this is different from people speeding in the highways, to put it mildly. It requires another level of competence among prosecutors and law enforcement officials in all of our countries. So what we are trying, that's one area where we're doing it in terms of cooperation. We have a communication now from the European Commission and the High Representative, by the way, on cybersecurity that is on the table of the ministers and of the European Parliament to increase the level of network security all over Europe. That's another aspect of it. We have exercises going on between our respective authorities within both EU and sort of NATO and some sort of diffuse whatever context that it is among sort of more well-informed countries about this. So there's an evolving network of international cooperation, but are we ahead of the game? No.
Are you saying, though, that a legal case has to be constructed, essentially by prosecutors, before anything can be put on the political agenda for action to be taken?
No, I'm not saying that. But, I mean, you have two things. First, we need to build our protection so that we feel that we're reasonably secure. But then when we identify someone doing something, I mean, if it's a state actor, we'll have to take it up in different sorts of ways. But lots of it are not state actors. I mean, hackers and cybercriminality, then it's a question of law enforcement. And then our respective law enforcement agencies of different countries must develop the techniques, the capabilities, and to some extent the legal frameworks to do it. A lot of this is by definition cross-border. So it requires a new level of cooperation across the borders. We are trying to do that in Europe, and we've taken some significant steps.
Would you say there's an acute imperative on this, but
yes,
from the political side first?
I mean, there is a lot out there already. I mean, there's the Budapest Convention, which came out of the Council of Europe, which has been acceded to by the United States, by Japan, by a number of countries that we would sort of consider part of the Huntingtonian liberal democratic West. But some members of the Council of Europe, like Russia and Belarus, have not acceded to it, nor has China. And this precisely foresees cooperation on prosecution of cross-border computer crime. But it doesn't work because the places where the problems come from have not exceeded. Now, this is the whole issue. We identify someone as being a source of some problem, and the government, and this is where I talk about sort of the funny kind of public-private partnership, does not want to cooperate. Now, that's a real problem. The government of a country will say, we don't want it. We're not going to do, we're not a part of this convention. The other issue, which I think people have, I mean, it's closely tied to this, and something that only reached the radar screen in December in about the second week, was there's a thing called the ITU, which came together to resolve the issue of who controls the internet. And the argument was, if you want, from the sort of the 2/3 of the people who were for the ITU convention was that, well, we'll take care of cybersecurity, but you have to give up freedom of speech on the internet. That was really what it came down to. I mean, that's really distilled the whole issue. So you had certain governments saying, "Yeah, we will cooperate on cybersecurity, but you can't have dissidents on the internet." Are we willing to do that? Well, the EU was not willing to do that. The United States was not willing to do that. And so, and if that's that kind of binary choice that you're given, that's a pretty tough one.
Let's get some more issues. We've got 10 minutes to run. I'll go to this lady here first.
Victoria Sampson, Secure World Foundation. I have a question about the Tallinn Manual, proposed code of conduct for cybersecurity. I'd like to hear some more. Why was that chosen as a normative process? What is the end goal? Yeah, and then the other question is, in the United States, it seems like I'm hearing more and more that we really cannot defend against cyber attacks. It's more important to mitigate as opposed to defend. I'd be curious to hear the panel's discussion on that. Thank you.
Okay, bring the microphone down here and over there, please.
I'm Terry Schultz. I'm a reporter with National Public Radio and CBS News. This may be geared mostly toward Toomas, because 5 years ago when Estonia was attacked, Tom, are you listening? 6. 5 years ago, after Estonia was attacked, at NATO we talked all the time about whether this would become an Article 5 offense. And you only mentioned it in passing. And we actually, as I cover NATO, we don't talk about it that much anymore. Has the whole threat just completely bypassed any usefulness of whether or not this could rise to the level of Article 5? And as we're all talking about these being non-state actors, how threatened would they be if NATO governments say we're, an attack against one of us is an attack against all of us? Has that whole debate just gone away?
All right. Bring the microphone down here, because there are several incoming messages about the issue of governance, like from Tim Seuss. Can there be an effective cybersecurity defense without an agreement, clear rules on internet governance?
Hello, everybody. My name is Zarina Haja. I'm a Romanian journalist living in Italy. And first of all, you were talking a lot of Romanian and the threat from hackers, but as I see that top, Romania is not one of the first inside the European Union. I am afraid Germany is up above us. But the question,
I've invited someone from Germany to respond to that.
Yeah, actually. And if I may say, my ATM, it's blocked from the Italian bank in Romania, maybe, and it should be maybe.
Let's not get into your banking problems.
Yes,
What's the question?
Let's get to the point. My point was about Anonymous. We are seeing a lot of attacks runs from Anonymous group on all the countries, and a lot of these attacks is have as a result of a lot of personal data of private citizens online. So what I'm asking is how come we cannot get to a common politic in order to stop these attacks, since they have, the Anonymous group have, let's say, a common politics on the entire world.
All right. In fact, Misha Glenny at dinner last night was indicating that his research and his work suggests that actually what Anonymous has done, quite apart from the politics, has actually been rather good for tackling cybersecurity in terms of making everyone aware of just how profound this is. One more question. Who's got the microphone? I did ask you to come down here, please. Down here. Can you pass it down? Thanks.
My name is Ono, Japanese parliamentarian. I'd like to ask the political question, the dimension of the question, that the United Nations General Assembly of last year have conducted discussed the rule and the norms of the cybersecurity, because some country like Russia, China wanted to emphasize that the security in the cyberspace is to, for example, curb those anti-government factions rather than the security of the freedom and the speech in the internet. So we have, I think, a space to cooperate among those countries who share the same common, same value. So we should have such kind of a cooperation among all those countries. So what is your
plenty of
opinion?
questions there in NATO's article, but particularly this issue about Anonymous. Who'd like to pick that up?
You want to?
Bildt.
Well, on the issue of internet governance, which is connected with this, and Toomas alluded to it, is immensely important for the future. We have a rather successful, although somewhat difficult to understand, system for internet governance, the so-called multi-stakeholder approach. That has worked phenomenally well, but it is under attack by a certain number of regimes who often using cybersecurity as a pretext, by the way, or they might have their legitimate concerns, are saying, let's go for some sort of international body, whatever. And their agenda is also the one to control the net, also from the more political point of view. So protecting and preserving the system of internet governance is, from our point of view, from political point of view, a prime objective. It comes down to democracy and freedom and all of those particular issues. On top of that, we need to develop the dialogue on cybersecurity issues with all of the different governments. The Budapest Convention is part of it, implementation of it. From the EU side, we've tried to get these issues into the dialogue with, say, China, say, Russia. And it is possible to engage them on cybersecurity because they have an interest in this as well. They're also increasingly subject to attacks by their own hackers. I mean, that should not be underestimated either. But when we try to bring in the other component, net freedom as well, it becomes obviously somewhat more difficult. And I do think it is important in the international dialogue to have both of these. Net freedom is fundamental. And if it's only a net security debate, I see the risk of that tilting in such a way that we develop structures that will be used by those where the real agenda might not really be net security, but might in reality be control the net in order to limit the freedom of the net. So that is an issue where we have to be vigilant when we discuss the net security issues.
That specific question about NATO, President Ilves?
Well, there's another question as well on this, which is the Tallinn Manual, and why do we do it? We did the Tallinn Manual, or actually it was done by NATO. I mean, we didn't do it, but NATO did it. It's to look at the whole sort of from A to Z, everything concerning law and conflict. I mean, there's so many different laws. We're not only talking about something like Article 5, and see how this applies to cyber, how cyber is affected by these laws, when something is a violation of some aspect of the law, of the legal framework on conflict. And that's why we did it. I mean, it was just to see what would come out of this, because we really didn't. I mean, we knew all the various things have been developed on conflict and all the laws and conventions. I mean, they applied to poison gas, to germ warfare, to what you do with prisoners. But suddenly we have this new realm, and that had never been done before, and so now it's available, and you can get it.
Nick, the issue of anonymous, could you address?
Wait, now, on NATO, which is the specific side of this, we have not really addressed in NATO the Article 5 issue to its full extent because there's a certain unwillingness to deal with it. Now, on the other hand, in May of 2011, there was a very important announcement by the Department of Defense by the United States that said, we will not necessarily respond in kind or in the same modality to a cyber attack. What does that mean? A cyber attack against the United States, the U.S. need not answer with cyber. They can do it kinetically. They can drop a bomb. I mean, who knows? But the point is that this thinking, the U.S. has thought this through. And I think that's where we are heading. And given the use of cyber attacks in conjunction with kinetic attacks, that's flying things. And in the Georgian War, for example, where the Russians blacked out entire areas and then proceeded to black them out on the internet and then proceeded to bomb them, I mean, this is going to be a very, very serious issue in the future.
Right, okay. We can't get into the defense implications in detail at this point. But Nick, that issue of anonymous and what you've learned about anonymous and what kind of signals it's sending.
Yeah, I'll talk about the group. I just want to talk about a little bit of public policy for 1 second before. So when we talk about this, we've recognized that, you gave the statistic about the percentage of infrastructure in the private sector. The thing which we really, and you talked, I think, Minister, about the cross-border dimension to this. So when we're thinking about public policy responses, I think there's a couple of things. One is we have to think about international standards because actually the infrastructure is global. The other thing we have to think about is how we get bilateral, by that I mean public-private sharing of information exchanges, and that much to be more sophisticated because frankly we've all got to work together. And we've got to do that on a basis which really starts to think about the kind of information we need to share. So we might want to really focus a little bit on the critical national infrastructure. I take the President's point about, let's define this, it's critical information infrastructure. And then to look specifically, to take your point about the groups. So there are lots of flavors, even of something like Anonymous. So there are lots of people who use brand names like that to kind of come together under a banner. So let's not, again, be too concerned about a name, but let's get to the specific, which is, again, it comes down to what's the motive of the organization, what are they doing, how are they doing it, and frankly, coming to the question over there, can we mitigate and defend against it?
Steve Erlanger, I'm being asked to wind up, but can you do something quickly?
Just very, very quickly. The United States and possibly Israel have attacked Iran with Stuxnet and other viruses. Why isn't this a declaration of war? From Washington's point of view, an attack on the United States is being considered a declaration of war. And is there any sign that Iran has been striking back? Thank you.
Right. Is it a declaration of war in your view, attacking with Stuxnet? Carl Bildt? You're on the record.
I'm on the record, and I think I was already in the record saying that I think it was a Rubicon that was passed. And the implications have not been fully understood and fully explored. Has there been any counterattack? I don't know. But I know that 30,000 of the computers of Aramco in Saudi Arabia was taken out, early autumn, October, November, whatever it was. And there might well have been X numbers of other things. And I think it is profoundly dangerous if we enter a process of escalation here. And in contrast to, nuclear weapons, in order to be a nuclear weapon power, that is bloody complicated and expensive and takes a long time when we detect it. But here it is possible for all sorts of states and actors to fairly quickly buy or develop a very advanced attack capability. And if we start attacking each other the one way or the other, I'm not quite certain where we end up. In a bad place, I suspect.
Let me say about Anonymous, since you asked me also. Anonymous,
there is no such group. I was asking about an act of war, actually.
Act of war. Okay.
Can you answer this one?
I can say that. We still don't know who did it.
Yeah, but there are several questions here, like from Ruben Gallego. Where is the line for state actors using cyber attacks? What is considered an act of war, Mr. President?
Well, any aggression against the territory of another country is an act of war, and especially if there are casualties. If someone dies, if you've blown up a power plant, that's an act of war. The problem is more that there's huge reluctance to admit that or to go along with that because the implications could be really horrible.
All right, I'm going to have to close it there, and I'm going to leave you with two messages here. First of all, I think, from my point of view, it shows that we need to reconsider this next year because so much is changing so fast. Two messages. Firstly, from Marcus Freitas. Does cyber war place everyone on the same level as to inflict damages? Will wars be commanded by youngsters sitting in their homes? And secondly, a sobering thought from Nina Sofia. Could cybersecurity be a higher priority than addressing issues of poverty or education? Those reflections from at least two people who have been monitoring this outside. Thank you very much indeed. Very dynamic, very sharp, very focused, but I think we've got to revisit it, maybe not next year, maybe next month. Carl Bildt, President Ilves, and Nick, thank you very much indeed.